दोपहर बखैर और द ब्लैक होल में आप सबको खुशामदीद। हम जानते हैं कि किसी भी मुआशरे में तब्दीली के इंजन्स जैसा कि तहज़ीबी, मुआशी, सियासी, सकाफ़ती वगैरह या बतौर मजमूई जो समाजी इर्तिका है उसके पीछे एक अहम ड्राइविंग फ़ोर्स एजुकेशन या तालीम होती है। मगर जैसा कि हर समाज एक सा नहीं है, वैसे ही हमारी दुनिया में हर तालीमी निज़ाम भी हमें यकसा दिखाई नहीं देता। मसलन कुछ तालीमी निज़ाम हमें असरी तकाज़ों से हम-आहंग मिलते हैं, जबकि कुछ इस तरक्की की दौर में पीछे हैं, कुछ फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग होने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं और कुछ बिल्कुल ही इस दौर से हमें आउट दिखाई देते हैं। टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस एजुकेशन अक्रॉस बॉर्डर्स एंड वी आर गोइंग टू कंपेयर डिफरेंट एजुकेशन सिस्टम्स अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, उनकी सक्सेसेस, फेलियर्स और ख़ास तौर पे ये कि पाकिस्तान के लिए हमें उनसे कौन से लेसन्स जो हैं वो सीखने की ज़रूरत है। एंड फॉर दैट वी आर वेरी ग्रेटफुल टू आवर गेस्ट स्पीकर। मेरे आज हमारे साथ हैं हारिस अयाज अमाद, हु इज़ स्टैंडिंग ऑन माई राइट। ही इज़ एन एजुकेशनिस्ट विद डाइवर्स एकेडमिक एंड प्रोफेशनल एक्सपीरियंस अक्रॉस मल्टीपल डिसिप्लिन्स। फॉर इंस्टेंस आपकी हायर एजुकेशन है इन मैथमेटिक्स एंड कंप्यूटर साइंस फ्रॉम the University of Minnesota, the University of Waterloo and Columbia University. Moreover, आपकी MBA है from York University, Toronto. हारिस जो है वो प्राइवेट और नॉन प्रॉफिट सेक्टर दोनों के लिए अपनी सर्विसेज दे चुकी हैं, इन पर्टिकुलर इन पब्लिक पॉलिसी, एजुकेशन और एडवाइजरी रोल्स पे। और आप द न्यूज़ के लिए भी रेगुलर कंट्रीब्यूटर हैं एट्सेट्रा। आज हमारे साथ हैं और एज़ आई नो कि जहाँ जहाँ आपने तालीम हासिल की है, ज़ाहिर है कि वहाँ से जो कुछ आपने ऑब्ज़र्व किया और जो सबक आपने सीखे हैं जो हमारे समाज में हेल्पफुल हो सकते हैं, वो आज हमसे ये शेयर करेंगे। आप लोगों की आमद का शुक्रिया। थोड़ी सी जहमत करके अपने सेल फोन्स काइंडली साइलेंट मोड में स्विच कर लें सो दैट देयर इज़ नो डिस्ट्रैक्शन। गुफ्तगू के दौरान या इख्तिताम पर जब हाउस ओपन होगा फॉर Q&A, आप उसमें ज़रूर टिक होइएगा। जस्ट रेज योर हैंड फर्स्ट सो दैट दिस माइक्रोफोन इज़ गिवन टू यू, क्योंकि इसके बगैर आपकी आवाज़ ऑनलाइन ऑडियंस तक नहीं जाएगी। एंड दैट्स इट। तो चलिए अब हम गुफ्तगू शुरू करते हैं। प्लीज़ वेलकम हारिस अयाज अम्माद।
चलो, थैंक यू जी, थैंक यू नैयर भाई। So yeah, I'm going to start this, and like I said, I'm going to start it in English, but we can transition between. I can do Urdu as well. I think I'm fluent in both. Like, not difficult Urdu, but as long as it's regular, straightforward, then I can do that as well. So the questions are welcomed in both. So I'm going to talk about, because I have had a long, both triumph and struggles and so forth with education in different places. Primary education was here in Islamabad, of course. I had regular education, I had special ed education here. Then similarly, I had regular special ed education abroad, regular education mainstream, and then advanced placement, gifted education as well, and then university education and so forth. So I've gone through like the whole spectrum of options and things that different educational systems offer, right? So, but I'm gonna go through some discussion here of just comparing different international criteria, because there are some standards. For example, the leading one is PISA. They conduct several exams from different countries to compare education systems in different countries, and they've been doing it for the past 25 years, from 2000 onwards. So in that ranking, there are certain countries that really stand out in them, and we'll just talk about them a bit, and then I'm going to talk about not particularly my experiences, but the systems that I'm familiar with in terms of which is US and Canada, and then I will talk about Pakistan as well, because there have been some issues there as well. Like I said, I initially did here, then my family members, I've also had whole spectrum. In 90s, few of my cousins who are abroad now went to school here at convent and St. Mary's and things. And then I have others who went to government schools and model schools. And then there are some who, I know some people who also go to these cheap private schools that have opened up in different streets here and so forth. You know what I mean? So I'll talk about that as we get on with it. to start with, so they do their rankings, and there are certain countries that really stand out. Out of them is Finland, is usually on the top. There are other Scandinavian countries all follow them as well. But then Singapore is also very much on the top. South Korea is very much on the top. China is in the top 10 these days as well. They have moved up quite a bit. And U.S. is somewhat below. It's in the 30s and so forth. And Canada kind of rotates around in the mid there, someone as well. And there are different, and then there are European countries and so forth. So they only do 40 countries, I think. So Pakistan is obviously not on that list. But there have been other. We know that it's quite a bit towards the bottom for various reasons, right? And we can talk about it later on. From what my understanding is. So what are the features of some of these leading countries? For example, Finland and Scandinavians, they tend to be very, they tend to involve, that is the Montessori type of model for initial schools and then the initial years. And then they tend to involve students in their, in the education itself, so conceptual education, as we call it. There's a lot of conceptual education, and they do pretty well doing that. There's not much homework outside class. People come to school, they're done at 3 o'clock or whatever time there is, and then that's about it. So most of the stuff is done at home, and they are at the top. On the other hand, the top schools in South Korea and Singapore and China have a different model. They are very disciplinarian, and they tend to have long hours and strict and so forth. But they also tend to have very high outcomes. So there are two sides to this story, that they are contrasting methods and how the systems are conducted. But then the outcomes for these systems are the same. Where on the other hand, there are other countries which have strict disciplinary as well, but their outcomes are not that well. Or so it kind of goes both ways, as we talked about. Those are, in terms of the high performing ones, that's their feature. There's more detail to it, obviously. Now, what could be some of the reasons? Well, Finland and Scandinavian countries, as we know, are quite small. So one argument is that they are small and so forth, and very homogeneous in terms of their wealthy countries. There's not much poverty in those countries, and so forth and so on. Parents have a more moderate liberal type of outlook, right? So one argument is that that could be, also help, that there's parent involvement and training at home, which also has a big role to play. It's not just the school, right? And then there are different arguments around that. Because, so in US, the system that I am very familiar with, is quite mixed. Now I will talk a little bit more in detail about US system. So US system is basically, the guidelines do come from states, some from federal, some from states. There have been changes over the years. But in terms of the administration itself is local to the area and community. So what that does is that in wealthier communities, some of the top communities, I don't know how much you're familiar with US, but some of the like let's say the upstate suburbs of New York or Virginia or other California suburbs and so forth and so on, they tend to do very, very well because the money is collected from the local property taxes. And these are very high, they're wealthy areas and so forth. So high number of money, maybe $20,000 per student or more, is spent per year on the student, and they tend to have good outcomes. Whereas if a lot of other communities, because US does have not very wealthy communities, which is probably the majority, and there's a lot of poverty as well. We are speaking in terms of developed world, so keeping that in mind. But the U.S. has, so there are quite a bit of low outcomes, and a lot of it is area dependent, as I previously mentioned as well. It doesn't mean that there are efforts done. There's money poured into some of these not so well doing communities, and some students are able to get help and stand out in them. So it's not the story that is no hope, but it's just that the overall outcomes in these places are relatively low. So that's kind of their mix. And then so there have been some changes over the last, let's say, a few years, 20, 30 years as well. In my talk, I was also going to talk about the impact of education and vice versa, because it goes both ways on social and economic outcomes as well. So because of the increasing role that tech has played over the years, so a lot of the university education, especially, a lot of the education I've spoken to at this point is primary, secondary, middle education. I've not spoken much about university education. So all those examples about PISA rankings are school-based examples, because I think that's where basically the talent is made or broken, right? It's not at the university level. That comes later. And that's another issue that Pakistan, sometimes people get confused here in policy circles. Anyways, so coming back to that, the US system is like this. So with the technology, a lot of universities have gone to these technology programs and technology courses and so forth, and then not many people, compared to before, have taken on maybe the standard subjects in science and engineering and so forth. And the financial incentives are as such, because of the jobs and so forth, that university has started offering such programs that are more current market driven. For example, Stanford, which used to be, still is, very highly ranked university, is offering a master's degree in web technologies and so forth. I'm assuming they do HTML and CSS and JavaScript. What else would you do in web technologies? But anyways, so those are the type of changes that have happened over the years as well. So that's problematic for the systems. In terms of the tracks, there are three main tracks in school. Now I'll go back to the secondary school and the middle school. There is the, for the persons who require some special education or special plans and so forth, they are served pretty well, because there's a lot of resources that are dedicated to them. People who are in the advanced program are also served well. Not every school offers advanced programs. Again, it depends on the resources and how much the community has. But the people who are in the advanced program are also served well. It's a lot of the people in the mainstream or regular program that tend to fall off, especially in not the high, some of the highest ranking school districts there is. So that's where the majority of students are, in the middle ranking, and that is a discussion that maybe internationally you may have seen or not seen on social media, but that is a discussion about U.S. education system that is quite relevant and takes place quite vehemently in the US. Now I'll compare that to Canadian systems, because I've had the opportunity to live there as well later on, and observe that system as well. So Canadian system is province, basically it's funded by the province. There are 10 provinces in Canada, and that system itself is more equal and egalitarian in terms of its outcomes and delivery. Every student in the province, the goal is to get them similar type of education. That's the bottom line. It's administered to the cities and regions and so forth, which are fairly, but the bottom line is that's the goal. And they tend to do fairly decent on these standardized tests as well. And then for higher education, their public university system there totally, so there's not much private. Recently, some private has opened up that are very particular, so we won't talk about them. But their public system is, they're large universities, several thousand, maybe 20, 30, 50, 70,000 students, and large classes and so forth. But that's how they deliver their education. Whereas in US, it's a mix, higher education, of private small colleges, lots of them, then state universities, and then the some elite private universities and so forth that get a lot of coverage and recognition around the world. So that's the basic overview that I wanted to say. Probably some of the reasons are, now I'll give some more examples. They're relevant because in US, for example, this extracurricular activities are quite a main part of schools as well. So like football teams and other teams and after school activities, there's a lot of emphasis on that. There's also emphasis, they do provide across the country school lunches, which tend to be quite, there's a discussion around that is an important factor as well, because a lot of kids who may not be fed well otherwise and so forth are provided subsidized lunches, which is a large part of the population as well. So that's where in Canada there's no school lunches provided. So a lot of people have to bring it from home and so forth and so on. So those are some, illustrative differences that are particular to those programs. Now I'll come more relevant to the area here that to Asian countries and particular to Pakistan. But before I finish this thread, I'll mention that like the difference between Scandinavian and some European countries' performance and North America is significant. It's not a minor difference. So there's a large gap in their performance as well. And so in terms of Asian countries, as mentioned, Singapore, China, Japan, Korea are top notch, right? Very, very good in a lot of the way but they are stricter systems. China in particular has 10 to 12 hours of school. In many cases, people come in the morning at 7 and they go home at 7 at night or 9 at night, even after doing their homeworks in school and so forth. So it is a very uniform type of system across the country. People are tracked. So those who are university bound go to the university, which is certain percent of the population. Rest are sent to vocational and other things and so forth. So they're strict on that as well. I will, one thing I forgot to mention about the Scandinavian system, that they also have a very well-defined university path and a vocational path. So after, let's say, 9th grade or 10th grade or 11th grade, the people who are promising for universities tend to go there, and then the people who are more vocational, and in vocational, they also include applied sciences. So I haven't done too much detail on that, to be honest, but in my opinion, even some of the tech stuff can fall into that applied sciences type of things, and it probably does. In Canada, that is true as well. Not to the extent as in Scandinavia that you have graphic design, gaming, this type of stuff is done in 2-year colleges after high school generally. All the universities also do computing related courses, but a lot of these are second track. They're not the proper, the main primary universities who do that, right? So in terms of coming back to, the Asian country, like I said, China is very, very uniform in that, very strict. And it is a system that is, there's also obviously social issues in China in terms of a lot of kids are now one single child. So not having enough siblings and things as well. So they just spend the whole day and evening in school, right? And that's what their systems generally are. Now I'll mention obviously South Asia region, India as well. So India has a mixed system. English is the language of, they have regional languages and so forth, and English is the language of instruction all across the country as well. That's adapted. It's mixed as well. It's not all like there's a lot of low outcomes. There are some good outcomes as well, but it's very, very competitive, extremely competitive, because it's all more or less centered around getting a job in US or getting a, excelling on the exams so you can get into IITs, because if supposedly you don't get into IITs, then it becomes really tough to go to US or maybe get a job in one of the big companies, and which eventually, there are two routes. One, either you go directly to abroad, or you work in one of the local companies, which are service companies like Infosys, etc., which have offshore clients. They're very large. You work for them for a few years, and then after that, you go abroad to study, or you move abroad on H1 or whatever it is, right? That's the trend. Like that's what. So there's a lot of competition. So a lot of in Asian countries, especially the tech in China, more engineering and hardware, and this side is more focused, a lot more focused, and there is. As opposed to software, all the software is. India, where English is the primary school language. Although having said that, not everyone speaks very good because the school system is like some are good, some are not good, that kind of stuff. They also have a big outside of school market in terms of in terms of drills, like doing all sorts of drills, English drills, other drills, computing drills, this drill, that drill. So there's like 3-month, 6-month, 2-month courses drill that gets you ready for particular thing, you know, to either to get into IITs or to go to foreign universities and get a job outside or something. So there's a whole industry that has popped out around that with, you know, millions of people attending that. So that's the as far as my understanding is. Now Singapore again is a very high accomplished country. The Singapore system, you may have heard of it. They also it's being taught in other countries as well. Their math and their so forth is very renowned. And again, it's a small country, wealthy country, and so forth. And they have made their system evolved over the years, and has good outcomes. A lot of these countries are very high focused on math and like China, engineering, math. India like does more software oriented things, right? But they're also very oriented, math oriented. So that's the like across the thread that goes across all these places there. So I'll discuss, obviously, I mean, Pakistan is a mixed story, we all know that, and there's a lot said about that. But nevertheless, there's some, you know, my understanding of how Pakistan is, I mean, I think the system has, as we probably know, has gone worse to worse over the years, just could not, for various reasons. Sometimes it's, you cannot figure out whether the language of instruction would be one or the other, or sometimes it's something else, and sometimes it's something else, whatever. But initially, in my opinion, there are some key factors that have caused the problems. One is the incompetence of a lot of the teacher hirees. So like in other departments, you know, a lot of teachers in the 90s and 2000s and maybe after have been hired who are on nepotism, right? They're not, or Safarchi, right? I mean, that's the teacher. So obviously, if your doctor is going to be not a qualified doctor, Safarchi doctor, and he's treating you, you're not going to be well treated. So if your teachers are, you know, not well qualified, you're not going to be well taught, obviously, right? And that's been, I mean, in Sindh, that is primarily the story across the province. In Punjab, it is to an extent, not as much, but to an extent, as far as my understanding is. So you know, that's been one major thing. Now, obviously, there's the private schools system, which has really mushroomed to take place of that, right? And that's the O-level. Pakistan is one of the higher countries in terms of O-level, A-level intake and so forth, right? Although the numbers used to be high in around 2015 and 16, there were over close to 250,000 people who were taking these tests. At this point, it's down to around 150,000, 120,000. So the assumption is that the enrollment, in my assumption at least, is that the enrollment in school has gone down in these private elite schools to an extent over the last 10 years, probably reflecting the economic situation ongoing and so forth and so on. Now, how that is linked to the services economy and social, well, I mean, it is, let's talk about these countries, like I mentioned before, right? Balance of payment seems to be the obvious problem in Pakistan. So how do you solve the balance of payment? Either you manufacture it or you provide services, right? There's no, I mean, those are the two obvious ways, the main ways, two primary ways of doing that. Manufacturing is long-term, requires a lot of investment. There can be other issues. Sometimes there have been security issues, other issues as well. You know, reputation, all sorts of other stuff. So that's a longer term. I mean, China has done it, Vietnam has done it over a period of time, but then they have gotten a lot of money inflows as well, and a lot of stability in their country, not unstable. So the other choice is services. But for services provision, you have to have a large number of people who, I mean, that's the way it is. It's not about, one who are, first of all, qualified in what they do. They don't have to be good, because tech, you don't have to, like, we are away from at this point, but tech is commoditized. So as long as you know and you can do your job, that's fine. And that's what, I mean, India and some other countries have, according to the Philippines is another example. Philippines is an English-speaking primarily. I mean, they have their own language, but English-speaking company, and they do a lot of call centers, and their services are considered quite good, actually, in Philippines, higher than other Asian countries who do outsourcing. So Philippines is another example. So, but if you don't have people who can speak, majority of people, because you need to get the job, right? Even if you're on Fiverr or you're connecting to the client, you do need to communicate, and you need to convince them that this is the job that you can do well, and you need to be qualified in the things that you do, right? That's how services work. So English is, unfortunately, I mean, that's what it is. It doesn't have to be English. I mean, of course, you can pick another country like France or Germany and speak those languages, but learning English is probably easier because most of the world speaks it than learning German, which is spoken in one country, but those, you can target those. But at least being familiar, being fluent in one of these languages, basically a necessary requirement. And some other countries, like, they have picked on it very early, despite of what they say publicly and their stance and so forth. I mean, they're big on that. So, so that's that's one of the main thing. And the other is, and the ball has been dropped on that. So like I say, in my opinion, at this point, the private sector schools still do well. Your Beacon Houses and Frobels and this and that, city schools. They've been opening up in new suburbs as well, but they're very costly. They are expensive. And then you get into your model schools and so forth. I know, at least in Islamabad, I'm not familiar with the rest of the country that much, but I know that they also have mixed results at this point, as far as I understand. I know a few people who have attended those, and I find that most graduates, unless they have a good support at home from parents, if you have done 12th or you have done BA or BBA or whatever it is, and if you're not able to put together a good paragraph in Urdu or English, and that is true for Urdu as well, it's not just English. Like, I've seen people who have said they have done FA and so forth, completed 12th grade, and they cannot I've had them, because I have people read my stuff, right? I've sometimes get letters. So I say, okay, read it. And I have seen people cannot read Urdu properly who have done 12th grade, many of them. So that is interesting, right? That we have, there's a system that you have done up to 12th grade, but you cannot, read the primary language properly that you're taught in. So that is a big, that is a big problem. In my, so also I've had some family members who have, like I said, attended some of these private schools. Some attended the army public school, and they tend to, in my reading, now it's, individuals vary, and this could be just those people and not the rest of the school. But in my still opinion, the forces schools still do reasonably well. The army public or the Air Force school, maybe they have more resources. I don't know, whatever it is, but they tend to still, although they're not doing O levels, A levels mainly, they're still doing the local curriculum, as far as I understand it, majority. But they tend to have better outcomes in terms of people able to read, write, and so forth, in terms of that. And that's been my understanding. And then you have all the government schools, in my opinion, are not, unless you learn at home, I think their outcomes are not ready for the world, not ready to provide service to anyone. So that's why you see a lot of local activity in the market in terms of, I've known some very smart people, very intelligent people, in my opinion, who could have done other things, but they do, file flipping and this and that, and they do it very well. But just because they're not ready for the international market, right? It's just not ready for it. So that's why you have to be involved in the local one. So that's that's my take on that side of things. Now, in terms of solutions, and then there's the other thing. The government schools do well, don't do well across the country. So that's millions of people. Then there are 26 million people out of school, as far as I understand it. That's obviously one of the highest in the world as well. That's problematic. And then the third thing, which is not talked about, because I've heard some proposals, I don't know if you're like some political leaders, ex-finance minister, I think Mifta Ismail and so forth, he has mentioned that, you know, if you gave every family 4,000 rupees or so forth, then they can choose their own private school and this and that. Yeah, but in my opinion, like your Beacon House and stuff are fine, but they're not 4,000, they're like 30,000 or 25,000. Right, so I think that schools that are going for 2,000 or 3,000, those private schools are basically money-making machines. They're not doing anything, really, because so that's another problem, that they're popped up, mushroomed all over the country, and they're not, in my opinion. There are exceptions always, but in my opinion, they're not doing anything that well as well. So yeah, that is the that is the take. Now, solutions, obviously, there can be many solutions, but I don't think any simple solution works well. You cannot give a solution in a talk or something. This has to be, because you learn, like, I always like to give a disclaimer with anything I say with my talk, that, you know, this is my information as far as I understand it. There can be a lot of gaps in this. There can be a lot of omissions. There can be mistakes in this as well, because some of it is subjective, some of it is objective. And when you actually go to execute these things, then you kind of realize, and you have to have the capacity to execute this, right? So that's why I don't like to say that there are simple solutions, that one can just do this or one can just do that. Obviously, online is one solution as well, but online alone won't do the job as well, right? So there, I mean, the people who are in education has to figure this out, obviously. But this is an urgency, in my opinion, that one reason that when they talk about economic and other problems, they don't relate it back to education. It's not the only reason. There have been other issues as well, but this is a pretty important reason, primary reason. You can easily argue that this is a primary reason. And yeah, so that's about it. That's my talk. If I'll take the questions now. I hope I kind of went a little fast, because I'm not, sometimes I have to pace myself. I'm not. So I hope it was not too fast on that, but I'll take any questions if there are any. In Urdu or English, it doesn't matter.
थैंक यू आरिफ साहब. सर, आपने जो एक इंस्टीट्यूशन का जिक्र किया कि वो इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे जो एजुकेशन सिस्टम के जो स्टैंडर्ड्स है उनको इवैल्यूएट करते हैं और उनको जो है वो असिस्ट करते हैं, तो क्या उनका थोड़ा सा जो है वो आप बता सकते हैं कि वो किन इंडिकेटर्स के ऊपर जो है वो जा कर के एजुकेशनल सिस्टम्स की जो है वो स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन को जो है वो असिस्ट करते हैं?
ये जो PISA है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन?
यस सर, यस सर.
या वो उनके देयर आर सम एनुअल एग्जाम्स एंड जो अक्रॉस द डिफरेंट कंट्रीज लोग लेते हैं. मैंने उसका एग्जैक्टली क्राइटेरिया पे मैं श्योर नहीं हूँ कि किस बेस पे वो सिलेक्ट करते हैं, लेकिन ये 40 कंट्रीज़ जो हैं ये अपनी रैंडमली सेलेक्टेड और सो फोर्थ हमें स्टूडेंट्स जो है वो प्रोवाइड करते हैं, जो ये स्टैंडर्डाइज अक्रॉस द, ये एक टेस्ट होता है जो लेते हैं. इंग्लिश है उसमें, मैथ, सॉरी रीडिंग लैंग्वेज है उसमें, व्हाटएवर द लैंग्वेजेस, एंड मैथ हैं एंड सम साइंस स्किल्स हैं. तो इट्स बेस्ड ऑन द रिजल्ट ऑफ दोज असेसमेंट्स बेसिकली.
Thank you so much for the very interesting talk. You did say that these are your opinions and you can't give suggestions, but just as like in an ideal world,
Yeah.
what 3 steps should the Pakistan government take to change this around?
Right. So again, like I said, you will learn. You can start with something and then you will learn and maybe modify over the as the time goes on and so forth. Because this has to be monitored and looked at high as priority. But I think first of all, deciding in terms of your language. You know, I would probably do English and Urdu both mandatory. And then do regional languages, like if you are in Sindh, you can do that as well. So you would have to probably go with 3 languages. And I would probably bypass like complicated, like literature, like, you know, when they do Ghalib and stuff, like that's just my understanding in late years. I will make that as elective. So I would make sure everyone is basic proficient in all these languages. And if anyone wants to do advanced stuff, then they can do that as elective in higher grades, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So at least that will, that could be one solution. It's just one solution. There can be others as well. And secondly, schools I would try to get rid of. I mean, I know it's a difficult thing, but maybe get rid of some teachers if they're in terms of performance. I mean, you do have to consider performance as well. Maybe you don't want to. I mean, idealistically, you would want to get rid of millions of them, right? I mean, there are a lot of overstaffing, but probably politically speaking, you would probably not do that at this point. But what you want to probably do is make it more standardized, across the board, maybe do more online, that standard that all schools have to follow and so forth and so on. So that could be another thing that I would do. And then there are other improvements too. You could, yeah. I mean, I can't think of it because you just asked me right now. But there definitely can be things, I think, at a district level, at regional level, that can be done. There can be after-school programs in school that you can keep, because one problem also is that if the parents themselves are not very educated, I mean, this is Islamabad, so a lot of parents themselves are very involved in their children's education, right? But if the parents themselves don't understand, someone will say, send them to private school. They're not able to distinguish. They're going to look at their budget and they'll say, okay, this private school is 5,000, this is 3,000. People say it's good, but they themselves are not able to assess how good the school is or whatever. So children keep going there for 10 years or 8 years, and they get this big homework and all this stuff they have to do. But at the end of the day, the outcomes are not there, right? So, yeah, I would, definitely try to really scrutinize these private schools, maybe go more non-profit route and other things. This is a complicated solution, right? You cannot just give one solution at this point, in my opinion. But it is an urgency, that's for sure. And the second thing, again, is in higher education as well. There are institutes that have popped up now that I'm not in favor, like I'll talk about political governments. I think after 2008, they really screwed up in many things. But in 2000 as well, like I'm not saying that, Musharraf was great and the others are not great or whatever. Because I think Musharraf made a big blunder as well. And I do follow I've been abroad, but I follow Pakistani news as well. Like I said, I have relatives here and abroad as well. And I read the Dawn from time to time and things. So I have my, over the years, 25 years now. But yeah, so one thing, when they started this early education, there was a big push in early 2000. I don't know how much you're familiar with it. There was more IT courses and things being done in early 2000 than right now. In my opinion, certificates here, there was a lot of push for that. But I think one mistake that was done at that time was that there was too much right away focus on higher education, that they're going to make a lot of universities, and idea was same. India, China, they all started at the same time. Pakistan kind of started, at growing at the same time as well, 7%, whatever. And then Pakistan kind of stopped after 2007-8, whereas the other countries kept on going. India and China are still going, right, in their own way. That has created their own problems because they have gone so much. So anyways, but that's about, we'll come back to this. But Pakistan kind of stopped at that point. So that never really, those millions of people they were going to supposedly create from this higher education never really materialized. And one reason was that you didn't have enough base in primary and second education. Just by creating universities, you couldn't just, the input has to be there as well, right? I mean, you cannot just create universities if the input cannot write a paragraph. That's problematic. That's too much pressure on universities. So I think that was a big blunder made at Musharraf's time as well. There are other positive things. I think that time was better in some other respects than other, but I think there was a big blunder then in terms of that too. And they kept on doing that. So there are some universities. I was talking to someone the other day who, I asked him to read me something and he was not able to. And he told me he's doing ICS, which is the 12th grade, right? Computer science. And I won't name this university, but he told me a name of the university that I never heard. Or should I name it? I don't know.
Please do.
Huh?
Please do.
Oh, it's Superior University. I hadn't heard of it. Maybe you heard of it. But then I went online and searched what is Superior University, Superior Group of Colleges, sorry. And I saw they have 150,000 students in twin cities. I could not believe it, that at least, unless that information is wrong, but I checked on Wikipedia and said Superior Group of Colleges has 150,000 students in Rawalpindi and Islamabad. I was shocked because I had never heard of it. I mean, I heard of Namal, I heard of FAS, NAST, I heard of Islam universities, you know, I heard of even the Open University, and stuff, but I'd never heard of this university, this group of colleges, and they have 150 supposedly the students, and that, you know, like I said, so I'm not sure what kind of, you know, maybe it's that student as well. I don't want to make a general statement about, but that has happened across the country, right? So yeah, that's where it is.
You talked about standardized testing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resistance, or educationists in the West are standing up against standardized testing. What's your opinion, and why do you think they do not want standardized testing?
Yeah, standard testing has been a controversial issue, and there are several reasons. For one is that it disadvantages people from from disadvantaged backgrounds who may not have access to training and tutors and other things to prep for these or pay for. Because whenever there are standardized tests, all sorts of services pop up to, for their to do well in them. So one reason is could be that. That is a primary reason, actually. That is a very important reason. Second is that, the education should be more custom. It's a debate, right? That education should be more customized, and it should be left up to school or teacher to teacher with broad guidelines from the state instead of teaching to the test, exactly. Those are I'm not saying that I agree with those, I think there's a bit of both in there. For example, in Canadian schools, they went into this conceptual thing, which is fine, but I'm not sure if every student can. I mean, if you're not learning the times table and you're trying to make these grids and so forth, and it's taking you weeks and months to get into that. So so I think some things, there's still some value to rote learning. I wouldn't dismiss rote learning at all. And like I mentioned, China and India and they rely on rote learning. I mean, they excel in rote learning. There's not much conceptual. I don't know about China, but India and some of there's not much conceptual. They've gone away, like last 20, 30 years, they've gone away from conceptual stuff. It's all, it's rote, but it's in English. They know English. And second thing is that it's, a lot of drills, You keep doing the drills, then you get good at it. If you do 1,000 problems on a test that has 20 problems, so, you get good at it, right? So there's that aspect of it, which Pakistan could, I don't know if it could do as well, if it chooses to go that route. But, so that's one aspect of it. I think there's a combination of both. Conceptual is also there, but if you start teaching everything conceptually, it becomes a problem because most students, students fall in some students just fall in the average learning group, some fall in they need more help, some are in advanced group and so forth. So even if it becomes tough, I think, to teach conceptually every concept to although there should definitely be a conceptual component to it, a large component, but I think there's some learning to, especially in math and things, not like rote exactly like Ratta or whatever, but at least memorizing. I'm not saying there's a difference between Ratta and memorizing, right? I mean, memorizing you can still understand and memorize. So I think there's still some value to memorizing some formulas and things like that without excessively relying on it. Yeah. नहीं यानी लाइक टाइम्स टेबल आपको याद हो गए या जो कुछ अलजेब्रिक फार्मूला हो गए 2-4 मेन ये याद कर लिए इस तरह की चीज़ें राइट हाँ वो आई मीन दैट्स या आई थिंक वो उसमें ज़्यादा कंसेप्चुअल इज बेटर
सर अगर हम एजुकेशन के हवाले से पाकिस्तान की बात करें तो रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर की एक स्टोरी है तोते के आला तालीम अब वो मेरे ख्याल में ज़्यादा जो है वो इसके ऊपर जो है वो इसके साथ मैच करती है लेकिन इसके साथ ही जो है वो एक बुक है डॉक्टर रुबैना सेगल की उनकी पीएचडी की थीसिस है कौमियत तालीम और शनाख्त और साथ ही में जो है वो एक द आइडिया ऑफ पाकिस्तान एक अमेरिकन एनालिस्ट है स्टीफन फिलिप कोहन उसके अंदर एक एजुकेशन का चैप्टर है और एक जो है वो डॉक्टर शाहिद सदीकी साहब रीथिंकिंग एजुकेशन इन पाकिस्तान। इन सब को जो है वो देखते हुए और पाकिस्तान की जो मारूजी हालात है और एजुकेशन की जो सिस्टम्स है उनको देखते हुए बहुत सारे जो है वो इश्यूज़ हमारे सामने आते हैं। लेकिन बेसिकली अगर देखा जाए तो मेनली जो है वो ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जो है वो स्टेट की है। और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशंस में जो है वो 25A जो है वो हमें ये बताता है कि प्री प्राइमरी एक कंपलसरी एजुकेशन जो है वो स्टेट की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है। लेकिन अभी रिसेंटली जो यूनिसेफ की रिपोर्ट है उसमें ये बताया गया है कि मोर देन कोई 2 करोड़ से ज़्यादा बच्चे जो है वो आउट ऑफ स्कूल है पाकिस्तान के अंदर। तो क्या ये जो है वो हमारी जो प्रायोरिटी नहीं है एजुकेशन, मतलब उसकी क्वालिटी, उसकी स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन और उसकी बाकी चीज़ें तो बहुत बाद में आती है। ये इसकी क्या वजूहत है कि हमारे बच्चे अभी तक, और स्टेट जो है वो अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जो है वो उस तरीके से किस तरह से जो है वो अदा नहीं कर सकती है। और सेकंड ये है कि पब्लिक जो है वो कहाँ पे जाए। अगर फॉर एग्जांपल 25A जो है वो उनको कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन उसको ये हक देता है कि वो अपने बच्चे को प्री प्राइमरी एजुकेशन दिलवा दें, और स्टेट अगर ये ज़िम्मेदारी पूरी नहीं करती है तो उस पेरेंट्स को किसका दरवाज़ा जो है वो खटखटाना चाहिए और किस के ख़िलाफ़ जो है वो किस कोर्ट में जो है वो जाना चाहिए कि मेरे बच्चे की तालीम स्टेट की ज़िम्मेदारी है और स्टेट जो है वो ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी पूरी नहीं कर रही।
ये तो खैर आपको यानी किसका खटखटाना चाहिए, आई मीन दे तो फिर दैट बिकम्स वन ऑफ दोज क्वेश्चन। जुडिशरी तो वैसे भी बहुत एक्टिव रही है ओवर द इयर्स, आई डोंट नो इफ दैट्स हेल्पफुल और नॉट। तो वो उसके कोई इतना ये तो पॉलिसी का इशू है, अगर आपने करना है तो करें, नहीं तो आप वोट करें उन लोगों को जो कर सकते, राइट। आई मीन यही इशू है। लेकिन और दूसरा जो स्टेट का क्वेश्चन है, या दिस इज़ अगेन आई स्टिल थिंक देयर, आई मीन दिस इज़ अ डिसीजन हैज़ टू बी मेड। अभी भी ये कोई रीज़न नहीं होनी चाहिए कि जॉइंट नहीं हो सकती या गाइडलाइन। ये इंडिया में आई थिंक आई वाज रीडिंग समवेयर, मुझे इसकी इतनी डिटेल नहीं आइडिया, लेकिन वहाँ पहले टोटली प्रोविंस की होती थी, देन दे मेड इट अ बिट फेडरल का भी इन्वॉल्वमेंट उसमें कर दी, गाइडलाइंस कर दी एंड सो फोर्थ। ये कुछ और कंट्रीज़ में भी है, तो मिक्स भी हो सकता है। यू कैन स्टिल हैव प्रोविंसेस डिलीवर इट, लेकिन यह है कि स्टेट की तरफ से टेस्टिंग भी हो सकती है। ऐसा तो नहीं है कि उसमें अब आई डोंट नो कि वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के एग्जैक्ट वर्ड्स क्या हैं जो लिखे गए हैं। आई मीन 2-3 चीज़ें, एक तो यह कि उसमें अमेंडमेंट हो सकती है एंड इट कैन डू बी डन, देन यू कैन डू वट एवर यू वांट। लेकिन बारिंग के अमेंडमेंट नहीं होती इस एजुकेशन में, तो उसके फिर वो तो यानी देख के होगा। लेकिन आप देयर इज़ नो रीज़न कि जॉइंट नहीं हो सकता, टेस्टिंग फेडरल से नहीं हो सकती, या गाइडलाइन फेडरल या इंस्पेक्शन फेडरल से नहीं हो सकती, फिर भी स्टेट एडमिनिस्टर करे, प्रोविंस करे। सो दे कैन बी ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ सोल्यूशन अगर निकालने पे आए तो आई थिंक।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मेरा सवाल है, ये जो आजकल रिसेंट इमर्जिंग रिलेटेड टू यूनिफॉर्म सिलेबस, उससे मुतालिक मेरा सवाल ये है कि व्हेन यू थिंक अबाउट इट, एट टाइम्स इट फील्स कि शायद दिस इज़ द राइट पॉलिसी यूनिफॉर्म सिलेबस की, बिकॉज इट इंश्योर्स to prevent discrimination and it ensures कि वो लोग who lack resources उनको sufficient education provide की जाए और कोई privileged ना हो और कोई underprivileged ना हो. But at sometimes it feels कि uniform syllabus थिंकिंग को और इंडिविजुअलिटी को डिमिनिश कर देता है और ये मुनफरिद सोच को भी स्ट्रीमलाइन कर देता है एक ही सोच में, विच देन रिजल्ट्स इनटू लैक ऑफ क्रिएटिविटी एंड लैक ऑफ प्रोग्रेस इन अ नेशन. सो दिस यूनिफॉर्म सिलेबस से मुताल्लिक आपकी
I think it's again mixed. Like I gave example कि China is such a big country, over 1.4 billion the population, लेकिन उनमें एक यूनिफॉर्म स्टैंडर्ड है जो फॉलो किया जाता है. ये स्कैंडिनेवियन कंट्री जो है दे आर स्मॉल, तो उसमें भी ऐसे डिपेंड, लेकिन बहुत जगहों पे नहीं होता यूनिफॉर्म स्टैंडर्ड लाइक इट इज़. आई थिंक के प्राइमरी इशू ये, आई नो इन द लास्ट गवर्नमेंट PTI गवर्नमेंट में ये इशू sorry this issue had come up. And they made that policy as well. I don't know if it's being executed or not, because I still see private schools are functioning just the way they were functioning before. So I don't know कि उसकी क्या practicality है, क्या कुछ है नहीं है. लेकिन I think it is probably आइडियली यस एक्विटी के पॉइंट से देखा जाए, लेकिन आई थिंक कि कैपेसिटी जो है वो पहली बात है, सबसे बड़ा इशू ही कैपेसिटी का है। और दूसरा जो कुछ थोड़ी सी आपकी 10% पॉपुलेशन बेहतर कर रही है, चलें अब यानी वो जो भी है अर्बन एरियाज़ में है, इस्लामाबाद में रहती है, बहरिया में रहती है, DH में, वेयर एवर उसमें मिडिल क्लास नहीं है, दे आर नॉट ऑल एलीट्स, दे आर मिडिल क्लास एज वेल, राइट? आई मीन मिडिल क्लास जिसको हम स्टैंडर्ड, मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि एनीवेज आई वोंट गेट इनटू दैट डिस्कशन, लेकिन ये है कि अगर आप उन सबको भी वो आप सारों को मिक्स कर दोगे एकदम विदाउट कैपेसिटी डेवलप, अगर आप कैपेसिटी डेवलप कर लें तो फिर तो ठीक है, अगर आप करना चाहो तो यू कैन डू दैट, दैट्स नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम। लेकिन जब कैपेसिटी ही नहीं है सिस्टम में, टीचर्स का ये नहीं है, तो इसका बेसिकली ये है कि बाकी बुरे हैं तो अब इनको भी बुरा बना दो, लाइक दैट्स माई टेक ऑन दैट, राइट?
जो क्वालिटी एजुकेशन है वो प्राइवेट सेक्टर के पास ही क्यों है? हालांकि पब्लिक जो इंग्लैंड में देखें तो क्वालिटी एजुकेशन पब्लिक जो भी है वो गवर्नमेंट के पास ही है। और जब हम पाकिस्तान की या इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात करते हैं तो क्वालिटी एजुकेशन सारी प्राइवेट सेक्टर के पास है। तो इतनी बड़ी जो पॉपुलेशन है वो विदाउट एजुकेशन रहती है, और जब स्टैंडर्ड एजुकेशन नहीं है तो वो तो फिर मियरली जो जनरेशन है उनको एंगेज करने वाली बात है। जी,
तो कहाँ पे आपके पाकिस्तान का ये पर्टिकुलरली?
पाकिस्तान या एशिया के पर्सपेक्टिव में जब हम देखते हैं तो एजुकेशन को जो है वो एज ए टॉप प्रायोरिटी नहीं लिया जाता है। बच्चा जो है वो टॉप प्रायोरिटी नहीं है, बिजनेस टॉप प्रायोरिटी है, स्टेट बिजनेस कर रही है, पार्टीज पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज बिजनेस कर रही हैं, एवरीवन इज़ रनिंग आफ्टर वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट, लेकिन जो बच्चा है उसका कोई फोकस नहीं है। वही जो एलीट माइंडसेट है या एलीट क्लास है, जो प्लांटेड क्लास जो ब्रिटिशर्स ने छोड़ी थी, उन्हीं के बच्चे वगैरह हैं। क्वालिटी एजुकेशन तो मिडल और लोअर में शिफ्ट नहीं हो रही, और हम मेजॉरिटी ऑफ पॉपुलेशन जो है वो इनफॉर्मल इकॉनमी पर है। और क्या पब्लिक को हमें रिस्पॉन्स करना है कि हम पॉपुलेशन को कंट्रोल करके दें, दो बच्चा पॉलिसी हो, फिर हम कह सकते हैं कि सारों तक वसाइल पहुंच सकते हैं, फिर हम कह सकते हैं जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में लिखा हुआ है कि जी तालीम और सेहत सब के लिए, लेकिन उसकी जो ऑब्लिगेशन बनती है वो कुछ पब्लिक की भी जिम्मेदारी बनती है कि वो इतनी बड़ी तादाद यहाँ पॉपुलेशन चिप प्रोड्यूस कर देते हैं और वसाइल इतने नहीं होते। हमारे और भी स्टैंडर्ड्स होते हैं, इंटरनेशनल मतलब रिलेशंस भी बेस करनी होती है। तो इन तमाम चीज़ों से कैसे निकला जा सकता है और गवर्नमेंट एजुकेशन को कैसे टॉप प्रायोरिटी बनाए। और हमारे यहाँ एजुकेशन जो है वो भी पेरेंटल अफोर्डेबिलिटी पर है, स्टेट नहीं दे रही, वेलफेयर सोर्सेज भी नहीं है, और जब ये नहीं है और खाली जो पेरेंट्स अफोर्ड कर सकते हैं तो स्टैंडर्ड एजुकेशन हो रही है।
वी टॉक अबाउट, यानी हमने इस पे पहले बात की है कि ये तो फिर एक वही है ना कि एक सिस्टम में क्या किया जाए एजुकेशन सिस्टम में। सो दैट इज़ अ डिफिकल्ट आंसर, क्योंकि ये जो ज़्यादातर लोग होंगे इनके पेरेंट्स, कुछ एक्सेप्शंस ऑब्वियसली है, लेकिन वो पेरेंट्स भी ये जज नहीं कर सकते और वो खुद एजुकेट भी नहीं कर सकते ना बच्चों को, ये भी प्रॉब्लम है। यानी जो प्राइवेट स्कूल में जाते हैं वही पेरेंट भी वो हैं जो जनरली असेस भी कर सकते हैं और वो मॉनिटर भी कर सकते हैं कि ये, क्योंकि ये तो एक इशू है। दूसरा इशू ये भी है विद सोशल मीडिया एंड स्टफ, ये जो पाकिस्तान की प्रॉब्लम्स हैं जो आपकी प्राइवेट स्कूल की है, ये तो जनरली अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड अब हो गई हैं कि बच्चे पे अटेंशन कर रहे हैं नहीं कर रहे हैं, वो सोशल मीडिया पे, ये तो अब उसमें आ जाते हैं। लेकिन मेजॉरिटी ऑफ जो पॉपुलेशन जो जिसकी प्रॉब्लम है यहाँ पे, वो तो ये है कि वो ख़ुद भी पेरेंट्स ये जज नहीं कर सकते कि उनकी है, और ये पब्लिक में कैसे लिया जाए। आई विल मेंशन फर्स्ट कि एशियन कंट्रीज़ का ये आपने जो कंपेरिजन करा, ये टू एन एक्सटेंट है, लेकिन इट्स नॉट रियली एक्यूरेट, क्योंकि अदर कंट्रीज़ के पब्लिक सर्विस, पब्लिक सेक्टर जो है वो डिलीवर तो करता है। यानी ये जो साउथ एशिया की भी कंट्रीज़ है, श्रीलंका का डिलीवर्स क्वाइट वेल उनके इन टर्म्स ऑफ कॉमन एजुकेशन जो है, इंग्लिश भी उन्होंने अडॉप्ट कर लिया कि जी इंग्लिश हमने करनी है, तो दे एवरीवन देयर 90% प्लस लिटरेसी भी है, इंग्लिश भी स्पीक करते। तो पब्लिक सिस्टम इन कंट्री में करते हैं, इनमें प्राइवेट है स्कूल सिस्टम, लेकिन वो इतना एलैबरेट, इतना बड़ा नहीं है जितना पाकिस्तान में। पाकिस्तान में द प्राइवेट जो स्कूल सिस्टम है, और वो प्रॉबली इट हैज़ पॉप अप यानी 90s एंड आफ्टरवर्ड्स हुआ है, 80s जो मुझे कुछ बताते हैं, क्योंकि मेरी फैमिली में भी ये डिस्कशन पहले हुआ करती थी व्हेन माय पेरेंट्स में, तो ये बहुत कम होता था, दिस वाज वेरी वेरी लेस। सो दिस प्रॉबली ये जो जैसे जैसे ये स्टेट फेल होती गई, यानी एजुकेशन, तो वो प्राइवेट जो है वो पॉप आता गया बीच में, और वो प्राइवेट में भी फिर क्वालिटी और नॉन क्वालिटी जो है वो डिवाइड होगी थी, यानी वो जो है वो होता गया ओवर द ईयर्स। तो इसको पब्लिक में कैसे लाया जा सकता है? आई मीन दैट्स ये वही सवाल है कि ये एजुकेशन की پرابلم آپ فکس کریں گے تو تبھی یہ پبلک میں آئے گا. ناٹ بائی بیننگ پرائیویٹ, کیونکہ یو کین بین پرائیویٹ, لیکن پہلی بات ہے اس پہ کوئی امپلیمنٹ نہیں کرے گا. لیکن سیکنڈلی وہ لائک اے سیٹ کیپیسٹی کا ایشو ہے. تو اگر کیپیسٹی ہی نہیں ہے پبلک میں, ایگزسٹنگ کیپیسٹی نہیں ہے, اسپیشلی ان سندھ اینڈ سم ادر پروونسز, پنجاب میں مکس ہے انڈرسٹینڈ, لیکن یا پھر نان پروفٹ سیکٹر سے لے کے آئیں, جس طرح سٹیزن فاؤنڈیشن سو ہوتا ہے, دے ہیو اوور آئی تھنک فیو تھاؤزینڈ اسکولس رائٹ, لیکن ان کی بھی آؤٹ کمس کا میں دیکھ رہا تھا. آئی couldn't really find exactly کہ ہاؤ دے پرفارم آن ٹیسٹ اینڈ اسٹف, اور وہ کتنی اس طرح کی فاؤنڈیشنس کس طرح اتنی ایکسپینڈ کر سکتی ہیں کہ وہ نیشن وائڈ ایڈریس کرے. اٹس پرابلی کوائٹ ڈیفیکلٹ فار دیٹ لارج آف اے کنٹری.
Thank you so much for such an elaborated talk. When we talk about the level of education, especially in context of Pakistan, we do criticize the teachers a lot. उनको सिफारिशी वो कहते हैं कि they are not doing enough. So, have you ever tried to upskill them, to reskill them, or try to train them to deal with the contemporary issues? And what's been done across the borders regarding this particular issue? Thank you.
جی, پاکستان کا میں ایگزیکٹلی شور نہیں ہوں کہ ٹیچر ٹریننگ کے کیا پروگرام آئی ایم شور ہوتے ہوں گے فرام ٹائم ٹو ٹائم. آئی نو کہ یہ اگین یہ پرائیویٹ, یہ کیمبرج ایگزام بورڈ, اور یہ تو کافی ڈیولپڈ یہاں پہ ہوتا ہے یو نو, تو انہوں نے تو ٹیچر ٹریننگ وغیرہ کے پروگرامس کیے ہوئے ہیں جو ایلیٹ پرائیویٹ اسکولس ہیں ان کے لیے. لیکن باقی گورنمنٹ کے کیا ہیں کیا نہیں, اٹس ڈیپینڈ. جی ہاں, پنجاب دیر از ٹیچر ٹریننگ, اوکے. اینڈ پھر اس کی ڈیٹیلس کیا ہے, ہاؤ ایکسٹینسو از اٹ, ڈو یو ہیو اینی انفارمیشن آن دیٹ کہ کیا؟ اچھا.
Some of the government schools in Punjab are competing with international schools. They are the teachers are trained.
Right.
They started, I think, teacher training and proper teacher training a few years ago. And some of the government schools have competed in international school standard. I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact competition. That is held, I think, yearly by the British Council, and they've won prizes as well.
Right. So that's good. یعنی یہ اگر ایک اور آئی ڈو انڈرسٹینڈ کہ یہ ان دا 2013-17 کے ٹرم میں پنجاب میں there was good development happening in terms of schools کی upgradation میں, and they did put quite a bit of effort in that, اور اس وقت improvement آ رہی تھی as far as I understand it. تو I would not take away credit from, یعنی جہاں پہ دیکھیں سب کے فالٹس ہیں اس میں, یہ نہیں ہے کہ ایک کا ہے, تو سب کی کچھ اچھے کام بھی ہیں, تو اٹس kind of like that. اس میں تو یا انٹرنیشنلی جو ہے وہ یا ہوتی ہے بالکل, ٹیچر ٹریننگ ہوتی ہے, ان کی کوریکولم گائیڈ لائنس ہوتی ہیں. سو یو ایس اور نارتھ امریکہ میں اور یورپ میں بھی یہ کیس ہوگا کہ there is a lot of, there has been emphasis on over the recent, I'll shift a little bit over there. We talked about some of the technology based things as well, لیکن اس میں social ایک تو conceptual کی discussion جو ہے وہ تو ہے ہی ہوتی ہے, دوسری social issues کی involvement بھی کافی زیادہ ہو گئی ہے, which is fine. Obviously you want to create a diverse type of group of students and so forth, لیکن وہ ان کی جو political fights ہیں وہ kind of they also gone into the school system. For example, in Canada, I'll give you an example in Ontario. So they were, they celebrate, obviously, jo gay parades hoti hain and all that. That's why. Lekin there was a case where a teacher was coming into school dressed as a transgender. And just to celebrate, because you are celebrating transgender and things like that. So right, so that I think there's some backlash has been over the years that it's good to, I mean, in terms of tolerance, that's very important to instill in children tolerance. But there's one thing about keep celebrating something and then that leading to one thing another. So I mean, what I'm saying is the political aspects of that debate or that fight has also spilled in to the educational system in those countries. Anything?
I think بہت شکریہ حارث بھائی, اٹ واز ونڈرفل, اچھی انگیجنگ کنورسیشن ہوئی بعد میں بھی. اور ایجوکیشن ظاہر ایسا موضوع ہے کہ اس پہ تو جتنی گفتگو ہو تو تبھی ہم کسی کنسنسس کی طرف جا سکتے ہیں, یا کم سے کم ہمارے اینڈ پہ جو جو پرابلمز ہیں جو ہم تجزیہ کرتے ہیں کہ بہتری کہاں کہاں کن ایریاز میں ہونی چاہیے یا کیا پاسبل سولوشنز ہیں، اس فورم کا بھی ایک مقصد یہی ہے کہ یہاں سے نئی سوچ جو ہے وہ ایمرج ہو. لیٹس ہوپ کہ کوئی اس کو سن رہا ہو، اس پر وہ عمل کرے، یا کم سے کم وہ یہ جان پائے کہ عوامی سطح پہ یا جتنے ایکڈیمکس ہیں وہ موجودہ جو نظام تعلیم ہے اس سے مطمئن نہیں ہیں اور اس میں بہتری چاہتے ہیں. سو لیٹس ہوپ. بہت شکریہ آپ نے ہمارے لیے وقت نکالا. آپ آڈینس کا بھی شکریہ. اینڈ ہوپ دس ول کنٹینیو. تھینک یو ویری مچ.